So this is the new COROS Apex 4. So this is COROS's latest premium outdoor focused sports watch, and this has been a long time coming, where this brings nearly everything that they just introduced with their recent Nomad, like their new button layout with a new action button, their faster processor which also allows for new maps with labels, as well as a microphone and speaker. Yup, you can even take calls on this watch. Now, something that has remained the same as the previous generation Apex is that the new Apex 4 is still using a memory and pixel display, and they chose not to use an AMOLED display like their Pace Pro. However, this is their next generation memory and pixel display that has more resolution and more contrast than before. So I think there's going to be plenty of you out there who are stoked about this decision to go with memory and pixel, but there may be some of you out there who are really hoping for AMOLED on this. Which one are you? Well, definitely let us all know what you think about that in the comments section down below. And another thing kind of interesting about this new release is that you may be wondering what happened to the Apex 3, because the last generation of the Apex was the Apex 2. Well, they decided to skip calling this the Apex 3, and the reasons were kind of interesting, but I think they kind of do make sense. So they said that the reason for this is that they're wanting to keep their product generations more in line with their product name. So their Pace series was always like one generation ahead of their Apex series in terms of the release cycles and the timing. And they also said that they didn't name this before because it's 2 generations ahead of the previous model, but it's been nearly 3 years since the previous watch came out, so I personally do think that this is actually 2 generations ahead. But I think another reason they may have just went straight into calling this the 4 is that there is no more Pro model anymore. So there's just one Apex 4 and then all of them have the Pro level features. So with the new Apex 4, so this comes in 2 different sizes. So a smaller 42mm model as well as a larger 46mm model in both black as well as white in both sizes. And the one I'll be primarily showing you today is going to be the larger 46mm model. So with the previous Apex 2, so the standard model was the smaller version and then the Pro model was the larger version, but there was also a little bit of difference in terms of the features along with size. Now with all the Apex 4, they all get the same features. The only differences will be the case size, the display size, as well as the difference in battery life. And then for price, so the smaller 42mm model is going to come in at $429, and then the larger 46mm model is going to be $479. So if we're doing the most apples to apples comparison, that's just $30 more from the previous generation Apex 2 Pro, which was $449 when it first came out. And I think that's pretty darn surprising considering this comes with more features as well as like the current economic situation as well. So for the hardware, so this is meant to be COROS's premium level sports watch that can work for almost everyone, where it comes with basically every feature COROS currently has to offer, but it's smaller and lighter than their flagship Vertex 2. The Vertex 2 is a very capable watch with incredible battery life, but it's also a large watch which may not work for everyone. But with this, so this should probably work for pretty much anyone out there, especially considering it comes in 2 different sizes. So for materials and construction, so this has a plastic main case along with a titanium bezel, but one change that they made here is that the entire case is now made of plastic, where with the Apex 2s, those also had a metal backplate. And their main reason for this change is that they said they wanted to reduce weight, but it also does help keep the cost down, as I'd guess that having a titanium backplate on this would have not allowed this watch to stay at pretty similar pricing as the previous generation. And having more premium materials is definitely nice and all, but it's also on the back of the watch, which you basically never see, so I'm kind of totally okay with that. And for the lens covering the display, so this still does come with a sapphire lens, so there's plenty of protection there when it comes to scratch resistance. And they also did reinforce the lugs a little bit to be a little bit more durable. Putting the materials aside though, so I think they did a fantastic job with the design here, where with the Apex 2 and the Apex 2 Pro, those were good looking watches with clean lines, but with this Apex 4, it has a few more standout design elements to it, like these notches in the bezel, which kind of blend into the lugs, and it adds a little bit something extra to the look, and I think they did a great job with the new look on the Apex 4. So for the buttons and the interface, so this has their new button layout they just introduced with their Nomad, where they move the rotating dial up and it's not centered anymore like their previous generation Apex 2, and I'm a pretty big fan of this decision, as I accidentally hit that dial before on the Apex 2 a ton, where I basically had to have the dial locked to prevent accidental button presses. With both the Nomad as well as the Apex 4, I haven't found myself accidentally hitting it at all, but you can still lock it if you want that extra bit of security. And it still has the back button just like before in the lower right hand corner, but they've also brought in their new action button, where this acts like a backlight key when just using it as a watch, but it's also customizable during an activity, where you can quickly switch to the map view during an activity, or you can change it to add a pin as well as a few other functions. But you can also customize the back button to do some of those functions as well, where by default it works just like most other back buttons, where it'll mark a lap during an activity, but you can also change that to do plenty of other things if you don't find yourself needing to manually mark laps. One thing I do find strange about this action button though is that during normal use is that it enables the backlight, right? But it doesn't actually turn off the backlight either. So you just have to kind of like wait for the backlight to turn off on its own. It's kind of weird, and it is something I mentioned in my Nomad review, but I guess that's something that they're not really concerned with at the moment. And then along with the buttons, this also has a touchscreen. So I think this does come in handy during normal watch use. Like it's just basically an easier way to go through menus and such, but you still can't do everything with the buttons. And the Apex 4 also gets their latest processor, which also came on their Pace Pro and their Nomad, where this provides a much faster experience all throughout the watch. But where it's going to be the most noticeable is going to be with maps, where the maps redraw really quickly. And this new processor also allows for the new map updates, where these now have trail and street names along with the regular topographic information that we've seen before. So with the Apex 4, they decided to go with a memory and pixel display. So with this kind of display, it has two distinct advantages: great readability in direct sunlight and also great battery life. And this kind of bucks the trend that most watches are going nowadays with AMOLED displays, which are more similar to something like on a smartphone. And I think there's going to be two different reactions to this decision, where some of you are going to be really stoked about it with that long battery life, but I'm sure there's also going to be some of you out there who are expecting or maybe hoping for an AMOLED display with all those bright colors as well as more resolution. Now in general, there's not really a debate on battery life, where memory and pixel displays usually get longer battery life because they consume less power than AMOLED. Battery life is definitely getting better with AMOLED displays, but for the most part, memory and pixel watches get longer battery life. There are going to be some exceptions, like let's say the Suunto's Vertical 2, but that's also a much larger watch. But in terms of readability, so interestingly, there really isn't an issue seeing either of these outside, even in the sunniest of conditions. In the most absolute direct sunlight, memory and pixel displays may win out, but when seeing them off angles, this is where AMOLED displays could actually have a little bit of an advantage. But in terms of colors and pixels, so this goes to AMOLED displays, where these just have more pixels and have a broader color palette, so they can do more with AMOLED displays in terms of the interface. However, this display on the Apex 4 is their latest third generation memory and pixel display, which has a brighter backlight and also has more contrast than before. But being that they are targeting this as an outdoor focused sports watch that could be used for stuff like ultra marathons, they chose to go the memory and pixel route, and I think mainly for that battery life. But what's interesting is that I was pretty impressed with what they did with their Pace Pro, which is their first COROS watch with an AMOLED display. So I was fully expecting an AMOLED display on this watch. I don't know. I think this is definitely going to be a hotly debated topic about this watch, so definitely let us all know your thoughts down in that comment section. So now let's talk about battery life, and this may be one of the reasons they went with a memory and pixel display, where the 46mm Apex 4 is rated to get up to 24 days of battery life, and then the smaller 42mm model is rated to get up to 15 days. And that's with everything on, including real-time heart rate, stress monitoring, as well as sleep tracking. But when it comes to actual real-life usage with recording outdoor activities, I'd probably more put it into like the 18 to 20 day range, which is still pretty darn good. And then when it comes specifically for battery life or recording outdoor activities, so first off, they've changed the naming conventions on these slightly, where they now have 3 different accuracy modes, where they have a max mode, which is their highest accuracy dual band mode, a high mode, which is their single band mode, and then an endurance mode, which is a variable mode where there's variable satellite connectivity to save on battery life based on your conditions. And we'll get into a few more details about those modes here in just one second, but just like daily battery life, there's going to be increases across the board here versus the Apex 2 Pro, but also even higher numbers than the recently released Nomad. So while some of us may have been hoping for an AMOLED display on this Apex 4, the long battery life is kind of undeniable about this, where it's still very much a sports focused watch where you can go do a multi-day activity no problem, which would be a lot tougher to do if this had an AMOLED display. And then for charging, so this comes with their new standard keychain style charging plug thing that plugs into a USB-C cable, but do note that it doesn't come with the cable itself, which is kind of becoming the standard nowadays with a lot of adapters. Now, one of the biggest upgrades with the Apex 4 is that it comes with both a microphone as well as a speaker, and this is kind of an interesting direction for COROS to go into, where this expands the functionality where you can actually take calls on the watch itself if your phone is connected and in range. But being that COROS is an outdoor focused company, they also do utilize the speaker and microphone for outdoor situations. So with the speaker, so other than just nicer tones all around when you're using the watch, you can also receive audible alerts for stuff like heart rate alerts, cadence alerts, nutrition, as well as off-course alerts when using navigation. And then when it comes to calls, so here's where you can use both the speaker and microphones to speak through the watch as long as you have your phone with you. Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you, that's my watch.
From the watch itself, yeah. So how's the volume on your end?
The volume on my end is fine.
Okay.
Are you at full volume or?
I'm at full volume now.
So right now I have you at full volume on my iPhone.
Okay.
It's not as loud as I would have thought, to be honest.
Oh, no kidding.
Like it's basically.
Hold on, let me.
I'm surprised, and you sound a little bit underwater. Like you sound like the speaker has been in the water for a while.
Okay, so how about now?
That sounds better there.
Okay.
I had to turn down my volume in order to hear you now, so it wasn't like crackling too much. But yeah, I think it's fine. It's definitely, as I said on my call, it's definitely better than any of the watches that we've tested so far from my teams or in sports company realm.
So I'm talking to you on the watch right now. It is reasonably quiet. Let me try turning up the volume here.
Okay, so from your end of things, let me just go ahead and put it up to my microphone right now. But you sound very clear. So go ahead and speak to the audience there.
I shall speak to the audience. So right now you're at full speaker, and you actually sound pretty darn good, as you just heard there. And now I'm just talking at basically like, I don't know, 6 inches, about maybe 18, 20 centimeters away. And yeah, so that's what it sounds like.
I am hyper impressed with how your voice sounds, actually. I mean, you sound just like you would be on your phone or possibly even some AirPods or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, you're not quite as clear as the phone or AirPods, but you're much better than I think almost every other wearable that we've done this call test on at this point.
Yeah.
Like you sound really good. It's very, very loud. But the full loudness, I don't think I'd be able to hear you if we were cycling down a hill or something.
Sure.
But in terms of just being here quietly, no problem whatsoever.
But do note that the Apex 4 doesn't have any built-in cellular capabilities, so you do have to have your phone with you and in range to take calls. And one more note is that you can take calls on the watch itself in terms of receiving them, but it doesn't currently have the capability to make calls. So there's no contact list or number pad on the watch itself where you can actually make an outgoing call. And the Apex 4 also does have onboard storage for music playback using like standard MP3s. There's no like Spotify support or anything like that, but you can listen to that music using a pair of Bluetooth headphones, but you can't listen to that playback using the speaker itself. And I'm actually perfectly okay with that decision. And then with the microphone, so other than the call functionality, you can also use it to record voice pins. And you could certainly use this for remembering like random thoughts when you're out and about.
Remember this detour tomorrow, so you don't ride it.
But I think this also could be useful for, let's say, logging how fueling is going. Like if you're testing out a new fueling strategy, you could say, oh, those 1,000 grams of carbs I just took 20 minutes ago, that was too much. Or something like that. There's definitely some interesting use cases for those voice pins. And then with these voice pins, it also has automatic transcription in the app, which I found to work surprisingly well. If you say something like, this is a water crossing, it can actually automatically identify that audio as a water crossing, and then it'll mark that as a label in the COROS app. And then these voice pins also get geotagged by location, and they can also feed into their new adventure journaling feature that they just introduced with the Nomad, where you can tie in your voice pins, any photos that you took during your activity. You can also add in 5-second video clips, and then you can combine that all together with your route to create a 3D flyover of everything that happened during your activity. And then one last thing about the microphone is that they also mentioned that it could be used for AI related features in the future, like let's say doing more advanced voice commands from the watch where you could potentially control your watch. And then for health features, so this is basically the same as their recent Nomad, where the Apex 4 has their most recent heart rate sensor. It can track HRV or heart rate variability during sleep. It has an on-demand wellness check feature, which also uses a slightly more accurate ECG type functionality, and then also has an SpO2 sensor for monitoring blood oxygen saturation levels. So with their wellness check feature, so this checks multiple health metrics all at one time, and this uses ECG type technology where you'll place your finger on the dial to create a closed electrical circuit, which can be more accurate than using the optical heart rate sensor for stuff like, let's say, heart rate and heart rate variability. But this isn't a medical grade ECG like the ones found on, let's say, some Apple Watches or some Garmin's. And another thing is with the SpO2 sensor, where this is an upgraded sensor over the previous generation Apex 2 Pro, which is supposed to be more accurate. But the SpO2 sensor isn't utilized during sleep tracking. It's mainly used for on-demand measurements as well as high altitude situations for monitoring blood oxygen saturation levels. And then for sports and outdoor features, so nearly everything that COROS has to offer here, where this is a full-featured multi-sport watch that can track all the more common activity types like running, cycling, as well as gym profiles, both pool swimming and open water swimming, full triathlon support, tons of outdoor recreation profiles, as well as some team sports. Interestingly though, this doesn't come with the new fishing profiles that they just introduced with the Nomad. Now, I don't necessarily fish myself, but I still thought it was a little bit strange that they didn't include them in here, purely due to the fact that this is a more expensive watch than the Nomad, and they actually do position this watch higher in their range of watches. And another interesting update on the sensor side of things is that the Apex 4 now has a depth sensor inside, which at the moment, that information is currently only visible in the open water swimming profile, but they said that they wanted to include the hardware now, and then they'll be developing more software related features in the future. But do note that they do not have any scuba dive functionality planned for this watch. And another feature they introduced with the Nomad, which now also comes on the Apex 4, are weather information and alerts for 5 additional locations other than your current location, which you can have on the watch so you'll be able to monitor the weather in different locations where you may be going. And then on the running side of things, so this also comes with their latest update where it can collect advanced running dynamics from the watch itself without the need for an accessory like their running pad. So now it can collect ground contact time, stride height, as well as stride ratio, along with all the normal stuff they collected before like cadence, stride length, and running power. And then when it comes to maps and navigation, so first off, it comes with offline topo maps just like before, but it also comes with the updated maps they introduced with the Nomad, where these now include labels for streets and trails. Now, although you can load in routes for turn-by-turn navigation, these aren't fully routable maps, meaning that you can't do on-demand offline turn-by-turn routing. So that means that if you're offline without cell phone service, if you need specific directions to a point of interest or location, that's not possible, but you at least do have all the map images to help guide you to your location. When it comes to accuracy if you're tracking outdoor activities, so this has a dual-band satellite chipset just like their Nomad, and the previous generation Apex 2 Pro also did have a dual-band satellite chipset, however the standard Apex 2 didn't, so now all the Apex 4s have dual-band technology inside. But they also changed their naming conventions for the satellite modes, where before it was an all-systems dual-band mode, an all-systems single-band mode, and then a GPS-only mode. So the first difference is that there's no longer a GPS-only mode, and the reason for this is that they found that the accuracy using the GPS-only mode versus the all-systems mode was a big enough difference that they kind of like just did away with that GPS-only mode. So now the new satellite modes are called Max, High, and Endurance, where Max is for maximum accuracy, where this is basically their all-systems dual-band mode. Then there's the High mode, and this is basically the same as their all-systems single-band mode from before. The new mode is really going to be their Endurance mode, where this is still a single-band all-systems mode. The difference here is that with the High mode, so that's checking all satellite systems all the time for the best signal, but with the Endurance mode, so this is still an all-systems single-band mode, but it's only checking specific satellite systems that it deems as the highest quality signals. So basically, it's not necessarily checking all systems all the time, but to be clear, this isn't switching between dual-band and single-band modes. It's purely checking fewer satellite systems versus checking all systems all the time. And by default, it's actually set to the High mode, which is single-band all systems mode, and this mode performs pretty good for my testing, where I'm seeing really good results out of it when it comes to both the total distance collected as well as the finer detail of the GPS tracks. So the Max mode using dual-band technology should really only be used in those situations where you may have something interfering with a clear view of the sky, like a lot of heavy tree cover or tall buildings. For any other scenario, I think the High mode or the single-band all systems mode should be just fine. Now, when it comes to heart rate accuracy, so this has their latest generation heart rate sensor, and when it comes to the actual accuracy, so here's an indoor bike ride, which I usually use to get a baseline to see how a heart rate sensor performs, and that's basically picture perfect. There was a little bit of a bobble here and a little hiccup here right at the peak of the sprint, but other than that, that's a solid result out of the Apex 4. And then for something harder, so here's some intervals, and again, very good out of the Apex 4. A couple little wiggles here or there, but nothing really all to complain about. Now, when it comes to riding outside, so this is where watches can be less accurate, and the reason for this is that bumps and vibrations from the road can make a watch bounce around the wrist, even the watch is really snug, and this can be even more so with gravel riding, which is actually the majority of the kind of riding that I do. So here's definitely where we see a few more places where the Apex 4 wandered a bit versus those indoor rides. However, when it comes to running, that was quite solid out of the Apex 4. I can't really complain at all about this result. But when it comes to weight training and high intensity interval training, so these are basically the hardest activities for a watch to get right, where these kinds of workouts are basically the worst possible thing that you can do with a watch when it comes to accuracy. And it's basically all about where the sensor is located on our wrist. And with weight training, our wrists are usually clenched and gripping onto dumbbells, which can affect blood flow. And then there's also a lot of like varying arm movement, which can also throw off these sensors. And this is where I didn't necessarily get stellar results from the Apex 4. Like on these lat pull downs right here, it had a bit of a spike, but then on these arm curls, well, not that good. So they brought a lot of solid updates to this new Apex 4 after nearly 3 years since the Apex 2 Pro came out, and I think there are really two things that surprised me. The memory and pixel display, but maybe more importantly the price, which barely increased. And at that price, I think this is going to be a solid performer for a premium outdoor focused multi-sport watch, which now has some additional smartwatch capabilities with that speaker and microphone. However, I do think that not having an AMOLED display in here may hold some people back from choosing this watch who are kind of like looking for that kind of display and were okay with charging a little bit more often. But for all of you memory and pixel diehards out there, well, I'm sure you're going to be pretty stoked about them going with the MIP. Anyhow, if you found the information in this video to be useful, do me a favor and just hit that like button down below. And if you want any comparisons of the Apex 4 to some other watches out there, feel free to drop a comment down in that comment section, and also be on the lookout for plenty more sports tech goodness just like this that's coming soon. In the meantime, have fun out there, and we will see you in the next video.